On June 12th, while the aggressor country was celebrating its national holiday, Russia Day, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine released data on the losses of Putin's army, over 1 million killed and wounded. That's more than the total number of the entire regular Russian army before the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But it seems that human lives have no value for the Kremlin. Officially, Russia last reported its total losses in September 2022. At that time, the Ministry of Defense of the aggressor country claimed 6,000 dead. Everyone understood that this number was greatly understated. There was a lot of criticism, and some relatives of the dead and missing even tried to protest. They held solo pickets and recorded video appeals. Even the soldiers themselves, who were sent to storm Ukrainian positions on crutches, for some reason also complained to Putin and hoped for his help. 3 years later, they no longer expect anything. They're simply being sent to slaughter.
I asked the guys out on the street. Here we are, standing with crutches, with canes, me included. You can't really see our faces well, so...
We're going to fight the enemy.
Yeah, we're going.
Category D sends everyone without legs, without arms, on crutches.
The blind, the disabled.
That's it. It's extermination. Yeah, they've basically organized a genocide against us. That's it.
In the end, it got to the point where talking about losses was completely banned in the Kremlin, and service members and their families were threatened with criminal charges. You'd think that a figure like 1 million would be shocking and sobering for Russians. But most people are still afraid and remain silent. Russia's losses in the war against Ukraine have long since surpassed the losses in both Chechen wars and the total losses of the Soviet Union in Afghanistan.
1 million lives lost for nothing. Russia hasn't achieved a single strategic goal of its full-scale invasion, and it never will. Ukraine didn't start this war and wants it to end more than anyone else. We are striving for peace. Only Russia is blocking peace efforts, rejecting a ceasefire and a meeting of leaders, and doing everything it can to drag out the war. Pressure on the aggressor must be increased. Andriy Sybiha, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, on social network X.
During the full-scale war against Ukraine, Russia has lost thousands of elite servicemen. According to the BBC, this refers to special forces of the main intelligence directorate, airborne troops, special operations forces, pilots, and Marines. These units were the core of the army. Years and millions of dollars were spent on their training. The 155th Marine Brigade of the Pacific Fleet alone lost about 2,500 men. Russia has lost at least 10 generals and more than 500 lieutenant colonels and colonels.
Ukraine has shown, it has shown the whole world, that it can completely neutralize the aggressive terrorist Russian state with nuclear weapons, which today threatens the entire world. To stop it and win this war.
I think that today, this number impresses not so much Ukrainians. We know the results of our own work, but rather all those who are beside us, or those who still doubt our capabilities, or those who are openly fighting against us.
Men from Russian regions with the lowest standard of living, both at the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and now, have the highest chance of being killed in the war. For example, as early as the beginning of 2023, Varyasia was already being called the land of the dead. Now, for signing a contract with the Ministry of Defense, recruits who agree to become potential cannon fodder are being offered a sum that is several times higher than their regular salary. But even so, they still can't make up for the losses. About 180,000 prisoners are fighting in the ranks of the Russian army. This information comes from the Ukrainian Foreign Intelligence Service. The Kremlin lured citizens of Nepal and India into the war through deception, which sparked a serious international scandal. Meanwhile, Pyongyang officially and voluntarily sent 15,000 workers and about 11,000 soldiers to Russia. But even that didn't allow Russia to patch up all the gaps.
The Russian Federation has lost an entire army. At the time of the invasion in 2022, there were 750,000 of them. Now it's already 1 million. That means the regular troops have already been destroyed, almost 90%, And now new reserves are being brought in, mobilized, recruited under various contracts, and they're trying to push them forward in different directions. These are no longer the effective troops they used in various parts of the world. And that's why now they're trying, of course, to rely on sheer numbers.
Right now, recruitment centers for foreigners are operating in all major Russian cities. Migrants are being actively hunted. They are often forced to sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense through deception and threats. A prisoner of war from China described how he ended up in such a center and what goes on there.
At that place, besides me, there were about 20 other people who came there to register, and they were all of different nationalities. Most likely, they were from Central Asia, Kazakhstan, and other countries. That's just an approximate guess. In addition, there were Arabic-speaking people from Ghana, and probably from Iraq.
At the latest meeting with security officials, Putin demanded an urgent increase in weapons production and announced plans to mobilize the economy. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, nearly 11,000 Russian tanks, more than 22,000 artillery systems, and over 51,000 vehicles have been destroyed. Ukraine's defense forces have managed to destroy or damage about a third of the Black Sea Fleet ships. As for aviation, the numbers here are also impressive. 416 airplanes and 337 helicopters have been destroyed or damaged. Just look at the recent operation by the Security Service of Ukraine called Web, when Russia lost 41 strategic bombers right on their airfields.
The operation demonstrated that Ukraine has found a way to use its own weapons to achieve goals that were previously out of reach. The attacks could have dealt significant damage to Russia's ability to launch cruise missile strikes and exposed the vulnerability of key military assets thousands of miles from the front line. They also revealed weaknesses in Russia's powerful security apparatus that is supposed to prevent sabotage operations deep within its territory. From a publication by The Washington Post.
40% of the Russian Federation's budget in 2025 is allocated to the military-industrial complex and the army, meaning to the continuation of the war against Ukraine. For the first time since the Soviet era, military spending has surpassed social spending. At the same time, GDP growth rates are declining and inflation is rising. Due to sanctions, the Russian economy is losing entire industries. $450 billion in losses just in the energy sector. At the same time, the National Wealth Fund has already been depleted by 2/3. The Kremlin prefers to stay silent about these losses, as well as about what is happening on the battlefield. What are they worried about?
What really concerns them is the imposition of tough sanctions, especially against Russian oil, including the new price cap. That's what really threatens them because it could cut off their war funding and force them to seek peace.
At the negotiations in Istanbul, the head of the Russian delegation, Vladimir Medinsky, stated that Moscow is ready to fight forever. And just recently, Putin declared, and I quote, "The people of Russia are immortal, and the path to this immortality," he says, lies through victories on the battlefield. It's obvious that the Kremlin dictator fears peace more than war. And without tough sanctions from both the European Union and the United States, he will keep sending Russians into the meat grinder.